All right, we are doing our first in a long time RMI webinar. My name is Christian Whitaker. I'm the head of marketing for RMI, and I've got Pete Vandeventer here, head of Denali operations. It's kind of weird, this format. We can't see you guys, but you can see us. So feel free to use the chat. Tell us where you're from. There's a poll in there. If you go. That you can answer to get a sense of how many times people have climbed with RMI. We're going to wait just 1 or 2 more minutes to see who else shows up, but feel free to use the chat, say hi, let us know we're not talking to thin air. Nice, thanks. Good to see the chats coming in. Yeah, we're trying out we haven't done webinars in a long time, and this is a new platform, so please bear with us if there's any technical difficulties. Hopefully it's going to run smooth, but we're mountaineers, not tech whizzes, so we'll do our best. But cool. Well, I think we can probably go ahead and get started. So yeah, like I said, my name's Christian. I'm head of marketing for RMI. This is Pete. He is head of our Denali division. I'll let Pete kind of introduce himself, but the way we're going to do this is just go through this slide deck with all the great gear and apparel information you need for Denali. Feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go through. We should have the ability to flag them as questions and then answer them at the end. And we've got our social media and content manager, Hannah, who's not on stage right now, but she'll be helping us moderate and grab those questions from the chat. So yeah, I think we can go get started. Pete, I'll leave the stage up to you, and go for it.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. Here to talk primarily about gear. I know it's a big question coming into any of the expeditions, and especially a big one like this, which is why we wanted to do this. Just a bit of a kind of how we'll structure this. We'll try to set the stage. I think it is helpful to have a bit of context on what Denali is, a little bit of what makes it different, or a McKinley expedition. We're called both. And then we will start to go through the gear kind of structured through from toes up to head, really. So this is a piece. You can see what's coming, and we will try to field all of the questions at the end. So throw them in the chat as they come up, and then we probably won't be able to answer them immediately, but we'll be getting to them at the end in that Q&A. As far as myself and how I find myself here, I am the division head for our Alaska operations. I have 15 expeditions on McKinley at this point, as well as a bunch of time on Mount Rainier, Aconcagua, north side of Mount Elbrus. I live in Colorado and have a bunch of time here as well. So that's where I come from and the experience I bring. I have been lucky enough my first expedition to McKinley was in 2009. And I did 2 that year. So I bookended the season. I did the very first one we ran, and I did the last one. And I've climbed quite a bit in the early season timeframe in May. I've climbed in June several times as well towards the end of the season. So hopefully can add some context there as far as the spread of conditions we might see as the season goes on. Good to see you, Alex. I am watching the chat as this goes. West Buttress. So this is primarily focused on the primary route on Denali Mount McKinley, climbing the West Buttress, recognizing that one of the pieces that makes this climb so different is the remote nature of it and how little extra support is available out there. It is one of the if you look at it, the Great Peaks of the world, where we probably have the least support and are the most self-reliant. We will fly in on the ski planes and land at base camp, and those planes leave and everything gets really quiet pretty quickly. And at that point, it is you and your team, and certainly other teams and rangers around can offer some help, but it is you and your team for the next approximately 3 weeks on the mountain, undertaking one of, in my opinion, the coolest objectives we try. When the expedition starts, everybody lands in Anchorage, and pretty immediately we are transferring up to Talkeetna, and that's about 3 hours away. And Talkeetna is really the jumping off point for the Denali expedition. And from here, this is a shot from the hangar where we're packing. That's an otter in the background there. 6 Kilo Tango in the back. That's one of the planes we go in. So from there, we load up the planes and fly into base camp. It's about a 45-minute to an hour flight, and we're landing on skis on the glacier. So the day before we fly in, we spend with a pretty extensive gear check for every individual, and then everybody is taking the time to go through, repack, resort, make sure kind of all the details are taken care of, and then things get weighed and put in piles to get loaded on the plane and go. So the piece to understand about that, and I think why a webinar like this can be so valuable, is that once we're in Talkeetna, we're doing a gear check there. It's really the first opportunity we have to all get together in person. And the resources in Talkeetna, as far as if we're missing something and need to track down an item, are pretty limited. There's a small gear store there that has some news, some consignment stuff. But again, it is super limited. So it's helpful. Anybody who is climbing with us, you'll be offered at least a Zoom call within 30 days or so of departure. And that's one of the opportunities to try to make sure that all the details are covered and you have everything you need. But then we're doing this gear check. There's the first time we really get to lay eyes on it. So hopefully we can take care of some of those questions today and really set everybody on the right path. Throughout a lot of our literature, and throughout some of the images you'll see in this slideshow, and then certainly on the gear list that's listed on our website and that is provided in emails, you'll see the guide pick logo. And so the guide pick side of things is we do have a process where we go out to our guide staff every season and solicit, hey, what are your favorite 45-ish liter packs for climbing around Mount Rainier? What's your favorite 85 plus liter pack for Denali and seminars? What's your favorite soft shell top? And start to collate all that information. And out of that comes the guide pick piece, where we see consensus among guides that different pieces of gear consistently show up in people's choices. That's not to say these are the only options. It's just ones that we see kind of consistently popular amongst our guide staff, and that then lends itself to the fact that will work well for the vast majority of individuals and whatever adventure they're undertaking. So it's probably helpful to start out with some of the pieces, an understanding of the group gear and what you don't need to bring yourself. I think coming into a large expedition like this, where we're living on the glacier, depending on your experience with guided programs, this can maybe be one of the more confusing pieces or just some larger questions here. So what are we going to provide? When we head up there, tents are considered group gear. So we'll be going in 4-season expedition tents, and those are all provided by us. We'll have a community collective kitchen, so stoves, fuel, all the cooking pots, the rest of it, shovels, the climbing ropes, snow anchors, so primarily pickets, avalanche probes, all of that is going to be provided by RMI and largely and is up in Alaska typically when the expedition gets there, and we're pulling that gear as part of that prep day. On top of that, food is always another big question mark. So throughout the expedition, breakfast and dinner on the mountain are part of the group gear and provided. And then all of the climbers are responsible for their individual, call it lunch food or mountain food or snack food. I mean, quite a bit of lunch is eaten on the fly as we're moving, as well as in camp kind of during rest days and down days. So climbers do their own lunch food. That's typically, we would recommend somewhere between 1 to 2 pounds of food per day per person. So for a climber coming in lunch food wise, really common to be in the 18 to 25 range, 25 pounds range of total lunch food for the expedition. Folks will certainly bring some more if you know that either like kind of eating helps, just you might be eating a lot on the down days just because it helps to settle things, or you tend to go through more calories. Absolutely. You know, you tend to need a little bit less. You can probably be towards the lighter end of that, towards the 18-pound range. And additionally, guides will be carrying rescue equipment, first aid kits, and those are like the kind of big comprehensive trauma kits. And so we are prepared to deal with, you know, any of the incidents that happen, as well as all of the small things. We will have tape for blisters and pads for blisters and things like that. And we'll see later on, but that's probably one of the pieces where, as climbers, having a little bit of a small first aid kit of really just sort of blister taping and your own personal medications and things like that is helpful. We will also have radios to communicate with each other, with the guides throughout the team, as well as other guided parties on the mountain. And then we will have a satellite phone for emergency contact, as well as in-reaches amongst the guide staff that we use to send dispatches back to the office for blogs, and for emergency contact via that as well. So pretty comprehensive kit that way. We certainly are prepared and have the contingencies in place for things that happen up there. And that takes all of the onus off the climbers on these items on this slide. Additionally, one of the pieces that makes Alaska unique would be that we are towing sleds, and all of the sleds are up there, and that's part of the climb as well. Sleds are an interesting one because it's something you don't see many other places. Antarctica would be the other one. And the thing to recognize with sleds is it's really just a way to move the pretty vast quantity of gear we leave base camp with as efficiently as we can. And we pretty quickly get into terrain that's not suitable for sleds. So depending on season, somewhere between 11 and 14, we're going to leave the sleds and just be moving things with our packs. So it's really at most 3 days towing the sled, maybe a fourth or a fifth, if you take them up to 14. And that varies primarily based on season and just conditions between 11 and 14 where that decision's made. So that takes us to the gear we're going to bring. And so this is, what's on each individual climber to show up with. And one of the goals of this is to try to help optimize some of these pieces before you show up so you can make some informed decisions if you are purchasing things, shopping around, renting things, etc. If we start down by the feet, there are some options in this category. So you'll see the triple expedition boot there on the left, the tall Scarpa. And that's a Scarpa Phantom 8000. So that's a triple boot. It's what everyone will take to Everest, and it is quite suitable for the cold climbs of Denali. It's the recommended footwear for Antarctica, several of those types of expeditions. So the choice then becomes, coming into Denali, are you going to bring a triple boot like that one, or the next one to the right, the double boot, is also sufficient up in Alaska. It's a Phantom 6000 on the screen, roughly rated to 6,000 meters. But we are in Alaska and it's cold. So the difference between, or the choice you're making at this point really is the triple boot is a standalone boot, and it's going to be fine from base camp all the way to the summit and all the way back on its own. The double boot is going to be a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter. It's a narrower profile on your foot, and not quite as warm. And it's going to be sufficient on its own from base camp to 17, almost certainly. And then from 17 to the summit with a double boot, you definitely are going to want to have neoprene overboots with you. And so that's typically something we're carrying over the course of the climb and bumping up in our caches to get up to 17. And then there's a decision at 17 based on forecast and how cold it's going to be. It's both forecast and real felt temp, and somewhat peace of mind for yourself, whether you put overboots on or not. So in some of the warmest climbs, which will tend to be the later climbs in June, there's the potential that conditions are set up so that you could do summit day in double boots. And you're still going to want to have overboots as insurance in case that forecast doesn't come through, and in case it's cold. And for most climbs, certainly May climbs, double boots are a great choice all the way to 17. And then you definitely want to have overboots on over those double boots for summit day. It's just the added warmth, the peace of mind to know that your feet are going to stay warm enough. Because especially up there, the terrain we're walking in, if your feet, if you're struggling to keep your feet warm, that can become it's not worth losing digits up there over summit day. And that really can become a decision point for folks, because it can be a struggle. We're working hard already. It is cold. And it can be a challenge, and overboots just add that extra warmth that gets you across the finish line. So those three pieces there, certainly there might be some questions that pop into the chat about those choices. The boots shown, obviously all Scarpas. The major manufacturers, it's going to be Scarpa and La Sportiva primarily, right? So there are comparable La Sportiva boots, the Olympus Mons, the G2s, and that really becomes a question of fit. So it's worth spending some time trying to find ways to get your foot in this boot well before the trip and make sure that they're going to play nice with your feet over the course of a long expedition, by all means. Over boots, again, it's really for a day of the trip, but it's an important day. And those you want to make sure to take the time to track down and then make sure that you get ones that fit well and work well with your boots. And they're neoprene, they're stretchy, so they are meant to pretty form fit over the boot. The last one on there are down booties. And down booties, there's a bunch of options, and I do have some thoughts about those just in terms of it's primarily a camp item, right? So it's some comfort in camp, which sounds like comfort, but it also means getting out of your boots for those times at camp, getting your liners dry, and the ability to be moving around camp comfortably, or hanging in the tent or hanging in the cook tent and have your liners drying out so you're ready to go the next day. So it's an important piece. A lot of down booties you'll see come with some sort of sole, or there's a foam sole in there and meant to walk around on their own. And they're somewhat waterproof or water resistant. And those are fine. The piece I do see, we're always in snow. We're camped in snow, walking around. And the biggest thing that happens is that camp gets packed down pretty hard via traffic. And so it starts to be quite slippery. And the down booty bottoms are really slippery. And people take have some other options. People will occasionally, it's like booties inside their overboots and walk around, which is still a pretty slippery option in camp. So one thing I do tend to often encourage, and I certainly do, my down booty is super light. This is a Western Mountaineering, just a down-filled sock basically, with a really minimal sole to it. That's really not much of anything. And this is one that I can put on and then slip into the shells of my boots. So I can be walking around down booty in my shells, my liners are still drying, and I have the traction of wearing my boots. And that's how I have done it for years. That piece is the one that keeps you from, sort of penguin sliding all over camp as you go. Thought there is you look at your options, certainly no wrong options, but that might be one small detail to consider. As we start to move towards sleep systems, a big change here over a lot of other peaks is just how big the sleeping bag needs to be. So -20 to -40, I think that's a personal choice. Where if you sleep colder, tend towards the -40. If you're pretty average or you sleep warmer, tend towards -20. I have done all of my trips, May and June trips, with a -20 bag, and always been quite comfortable. So that's a fine option. But again, either one of these down bags are vastly preferred over any other options you have, right? Primarily because they compress much better. So if you want a down bag, you want a compression stuff sack, they do make synthetic ones. We're not dealing with much moisture up there. And the compressibility is the biggest deciding factor. So track down a down one. Compression stuff sack, again, something to try to make it as small as you can in your pack, because it does take a lot of space in the end. And then the rest of the sleep system, inflatable sleeping pad, one of the small, really packable Neo Airs, will make you much more comfortable. And then I tend to go with a full length inflatable one, like the Neo Air. And then you also definitely want a closed cell foam pad in addition to go underneath the inflatable pad. And that then you get a thermal break from the sleeping on the snow. And then you get the insulative quality of the inflatable pad. And with the closed cell foam pad, I do take a 3/4 one just for slightly smaller weight and slightly smaller bulk. And so I have a 3/4 one, full length inflatable underneath me. That works great. And then at 17, at times, if things are just a little chillier, I can tuck some Gore-Tex tops and bottoms or my pack or something like that under the foot zone where the foam pad isn't, and add a little bit of warmth that way. So there are some options. Certainly a full length one would be okay too. And then the last one are the puffy pants. So something that makes Alaska unique is just the cold. So puffy pants, primarily, again, we're going to be wearing these in camp. So full zip is preferred. This is a Black Diamond belay pant, and the full zip piece lets you, kit up in the morning, get your harness on under them, and stay in the puffy pants and stay warm right until everybody's ready to rope up and go, and then strip them off and start walking. And they are typically too warm to really climb in, with the exception of summit day. And on summit day, we often are climbing in puffy pants, at least for that first 2 hours or so across the Autobahn. And then from there, it depends on the day. But important one to have, both for comfort and just overall warmth, and a good summit day buffer. So as we start moving through some more of the overall layering system, you'll see on the screen there's going to be, kind of a system that works well by default. And then I'm going to try to expand on a few pieces of where there is some room to, not improvise, but some room to add in there and create some more flexibility for yourself as well. So there are some spots where personally, after a couple of trips, I maybe diverge a little bit from the gear list while maintaining sort of the idea and the integrity of the gear list and the idea behind what we're trying to be prepared for and have. So on the lower body, off the bat, like pretty normal setup, right? Socks, underwear, base layer, climbing pants, hard shell pants, and insulated pants. The reality with a few of these things, hard shell pants, you're hoping just like most climbs, to not put them on. And in Alaska, we're carrying them primarily for wind and a little bit of insulative value as well. So with those, I take the lightest waterproof full zip pants I can find, right? Rather than a kind of a heavier, more fully featured Gore-Tex thing. I want it to be as stripped down and just lightweight and small as I can find. We talked through the puffy pants side of things. And then soft shell pants, the piece we deal with in Alaska is that you both are going to encounter some really warm temperatures down low in the sunshine, moving across the lower Kahiltna, and some really cold temperatures, especially up high on the mountain, or if we end up in some weather. So I tend to shoot for kind of a mid-weight soft shell climbing pant. Certainly not like the lightest kind of alpine pant, and but at the same time, we're going to be working hard. We're going to be exerting, so I don't pick out the kind of heaviest fleece winter one either. So somewhere kind of shooting the middle in terms of weight is really nice. Base layers, I choose, again, kind of the lightest weight that I can find, because I do have puffy pants to add more warmth on summit day if I need to. And I find primarily I'm wearing base layers on summit day. Really don't put them on until 17 on most trips, maybe at 14 for a colder move to 17. So I take a super lightweight 3/4 length, like boot cut pair of merino base layers. And again, that spends most of its time just moving up the hill with me, and really just put on the last day. Socks, I don't think can emphasize the importance of enough. And primarily the important piece is just that you find a system that works for you and the boots you're bringing. I think quite often we go into a cold expedition like this thinking that because it's cold, we need a thicker sock. And we start off with some pretty thick socks. And the reality is we're wearing warm boots. We are down low, and our feet will tend to get warm through those first days, especially in the thickest socks. And then up high, those thickest socks, when we start to lace the boot down, can actually create some constriction and make your feet a little bit colder. So again, this one I find to be very individual. It depends on your foot and the fit of your boot and the rest. But I climb base camp to 17 in a super lightweight pair. It's a Smart Wool PhD lightweight ski sock. So, just below knee length, really light, thin ski sock. And that does the best at managing moisture on my feet, preventing blisters, keeps me plenty warm to 17. And a transcript, interesting. And so that piece has always worked for me well. I know, there are folks who swear by a liner sock, outer sock combo. That works. That's great. If that works for your feet and you train that way and you work with your boots that way, and that's been working for your feet, wonderful. And so find that system. Numbers wise, it varies for some of the variation is going to be what people are sort of comfortable with, how much comfort you're willing to forego on a long trip like this. But my number has always been 5 changes of underwear and 5 pair of socks. And that becomes when I can go to 11, and that'll be my first change. And so then I can cache a pair of each at 11 that's dirty and be moving up with the rest. I'll do another change at 14 when I move to 17. So I'll leave a second set there, go into 17 in a fresh set. Then I always keep a fresh set of socks just designated for summit day, so that I've got like a nice fluffy lofted pair of socks for summit day to be as warm as my feet can be. And then, so that would be number 4. And then on the way down, it's really typically about 2 days to walk out as we start to leave 17. Then I have my choice. I can wear the pair that I wore to get to 17 and just always have a reserve, or I can go to that 5th pair for the walkout when our feet are already pretty tired and we're just trying to get home. So the idea is basically you can probably do the expedition with 4 of each, but it's really nice to have a buffer for both underwear and socks of +1, just in case you need to make that change. Other folks I know run a slightly different system, especially with socks, where they'll wear one pair on day one, and then they'll put the next pair on day two and be drying the first pair, and they just do an alternating thing for the first week or 2 weeks or week to 10 days of the expedition, and then flip into a new 2-pair system. And again, always trying to have a fresh pair of socks for summit day is a really good way to go. One piece I have started the last few years that by no means is mandatory. I kind of happened to have it via skiing, and going into a trip thought it could be helpful, and it worked out well for me. So I've started adding into my kit my summit socks, or a pair of heated electronic socks. It's kind of at points it makes me feel like I'm getting soft. But the added insurance of just being able to turn on the batteries on low on summit day, and have that little bit of extra warmth and know that I don't even have to worry about my feet, has been a game changer for me. It's a piece I really like. They are by no means cheap. They are expensive. But if you either have them around or it is, something your feet run cold or the rest, it could be a worthy thing to track down. The battery is probably the question for everybody. I go on with them charged, and then I don't touch them for the whole beginning of the trip, right? I'm not using these until 17. And the night before summit, I'll plug them into my battery pack at 17. They typically are fine. It's just a double check top up, and they don't take very long to show that they're full again. And then click them on there, and on low setting, these have been good for somewhere between 8 and 10 hours, which is the bulk of what I, need the heat for on summit day. So that can be a helpful way to go. And somebody's asking what the name is, and that's the ones I have are Lenz, Lenz. There's another company, Thermic, that I've never personally used, but there are a few options out there, but Lenz is definitely a good one that I've used. So from the lower body, as we go up towards the top, run this sort of six layer system, starting with a base layer, sun hoodie base layer, relatively interchangeable, right? In the sense that sun hoodies are just a long sleeve base layer with a hood. We are walking up the lower Kahiltna, broad sunlight. It is going to be hot. And one of the things we're trying to be the most diligent about over the course of the expedition is sun protection, because we're taking it from the reflection off the snow. Sun is quite strong up there, and the snow is quite white and reflective. So sun hoodies are an excellent way to go. And then adding on top of that, and really having a system that just continually adds, you've got your kind of lightweight fleece layer, lightweight insulating layer. Then the midweight layer is going to be that sort of kind of active, breathable micro puff, maybe. It might be a soft shell coat, something like that, but something that adds a decent amount of warmth with it, but still breathes is the important one with that. I find you spend the most of the trip moving in some version of that first 3 layers. And like we'll climb to 17 in those. That day is typically still pretty comfortable. The heavyweight kind of down micro puff, then for daytime around camp, for rest breaks is great. For the colder days we are moving, things like that. That layer is quite nice. You got your hard shell coat. Again, find we don't actually spend that much time in it, but primarily bringing it for wind. And you really hope to not need it for water, but certainly there are times with the, at a later trip in June, July, where trips, especially on the walk out, have found themselves in a bit of liquid precip. And then lastly, the big insulated expedition parka. And that one, in many ways, you can't go too big with that in Alaska. We're going to be dealing with temperatures as low as -20, -30, pretty routinely up high. And certainly could be down into the -35 or -40, and with wind chill. So we want that parka to be as big, as puffy. Down again is by far the preference because it will then compress better than any of the synthetic options. So that's kind of the overall system, and that works really well for folks. There are a few pieces I personally change that if it's something that kind of fits with your system would certainly be acceptable as well. So I tend to add a few little pieces in here, as well as I use a sun hoodie less in Alaska than I do pretty much anywhere else. Like I quite often I'm in a sun hoodie on Rainier, lower 48 for sure. In Alaska, my system tends to be like a merino t-shirt. So just a light wool t-shirt. And then I find I'm almost always then in that next lightweight fleece layer. So like a Patagonia R1, it's a black diamond coefficient hoodie, but like a lightweight hoodie fleece that breathes really well. And the t-shirt and the fleece, I walk out of base camp in and spend quite a bit of the expedition in just that combo. The next piece I bring that's not on this list, but that's quite nice, is just a really light, slightly puffy vest. So the vest over that t-shirt fleece combo, again, is something I can move in quite well and remain comfortable. And the piece that makes that deal with almost every weather condition I can run into is then bringing like a really light, like a light nylon wind shirt. This is a black diamond option, but a light nylon wind shirt. Either that goes over the fleece under the vest, or some days it's over the fleece and the vest. And that is the way I move, certainly to 14 and most days to 17 as well. And then I will throw in still like a light kind of breathable nano air, nano puff type thing, and a down sweater, so that I have both of those options that layer together, keep me warm. And then I also have the insulated parka as well. So a few more pieces in there, but I find that gives me a bit more adaptability for the effort we're putting out and dealing with some changing weather conditions. So that certainly could be something that you could look at and would be quite acceptable. I find generally in Alaska, my approach in many places, it's like, how do we go as light as possible? Alaska, we're going to be heavy. So there's certainly is a premium on trying to be as light as possible. But in terms of having a layer or two layers, especially some smaller, lighter ones that might add some adaptability, it's well worth the cost to just have a few more options up there to deal with what the weather can throw our way. And then, not for the mountain, but sometimes forgotten, there's time both in Talkeetna on the front end and on the back end as we come back into town. And typically those weather conditions are wildly different. In the May trip, you can come into Talkeetna and there's still snow on the ground. It's cold, it's drizzly. You may be wearing your hard shells around, and we're in long pants, running shoes, hoodie, like down hoodies. We're pretty bundled up as we land. You go do the trip and you fly off into Talkeetna that's suddenly midsummer and it's 75, 80 degrees. Everybody's in shorts and t-shirts, and especially coming off the glacier, it feels that much warmer. And flip-flops and shorts are your best friend. So travel clothes are important. Think through that coming into the trip. Make sure you leave yourself some comfy ones, especially for when you fly off, because that is probably one of the highlights of the trip, is when you do finally get to peel off the mountain clothes in the hangar and get back into cotton. And now the trip is truly over and we've done it. So some of the other details around it, again, a lot of what we're going to see is pretty warm and sunny. Alaska is a place where you can find yourself climbing in marginal weather and in a little bit of snow and wind, but it happens as things change, and maybe it's good enough to climb, but the most of the time we are shooting to climb in good weather. And if the weather is saying no, then we're going to take a rest day and wait for the next one. It is an expedition that rewards patience. It is hard to force your way up there, just because it's big, it's cold, and we are so far from help. So we're typically climbing in pretty bluebird conditions and pretty warm weather. So sun protection, your ball cap is going to be your best friend. Additionally, it's going to be cold, and we have a lot of time in camp. We'll be in the sun. We're in Alaska in the summertime. We're not above the Arctic Circle, but the sun doesn't dip very low. And so we've got a lot of hours of sunshine, and then it's still usable light through nighttime in terms of moving around. But the moment you lose the direct sun, all of a sudden the temperature plummets back to the felt temperature plummets back to the real temp of 0, -10, -20, whatever it may be. So warm hats for camp time, and then certainly for up high on the mountain. And then we do need to have a helmet. We will spend quite a bit of the expedition climbing without the helmet on. So the whole glacial approach, coming up to 11, we don't need to have a helmet on, and it typically would be it holds in too much heat to be comfortable. The move, then there is a section on the move to 14 as we round Windy Corner, where for about 45 minutes we need to have a helmet on to protect against rockfall. So we typically will just carry them until we're about to enter that zone, throw them on, move through that zone, and then pull them back off. And then helmets for the fixed lines are important, because you do have climbers above you. At that point, we're wearing them primarily for things that may come off packs and climbers from above us. So protecting against that side of things. Typically do not wear helmets on summit day, and they're not needed for as we move along the West Buttress Ridge proper, so above the fixed lines. So you want a helmet. We're not going to use it all the time, so it does spend a fair bit of time in your duffel, in your pack, being carried. If you have, this is one of those where, like, if you have a helmet that functions fine, even if it's a bit beat up, like, that's the helmet to bring. If you buy a brand new shiny helmet for this trip, it'll come back with some dings, mostly from being in your duffel and from being carried rather than being worn and climbed in. So that piece, the helmet's mandatory. And then other face protection, certainly a buff. I think everybody at this point pretty much shows up with buffs. And that's my primary sun protection. I said I don't use the sun hoodie up here as much. I typically am a ball cap with a buff pulled up over the ball cap, right to my nose, and trying to hide from the sun that way. So a buff is both great sun protection, good wind protection, and then some added warmth as well. Balaclava, there's no reason not to. They do seem to, folks don't come with them as often anymore. They've kind of gone out of popularity, and I don't think you have to come with a balaclava. And if you like having one for insurance, by all means bring it. It would always make sense. I think the biggest thing with a balaclava is you get in it and you're kind of trapped in it, and it becomes harder to regulate your heat that way, where a buff is a bit easier. And the same with the thermal face masks. So the neoprene masks, again, great wind protection, warmth, really a summit day consideration. And I look at these and I say, really, if you're going to bring one of these, it's a thermal mask or a balaclava. You don't need both. They serve the same purpose, and it's really a one or the other. And then glacier glasses and goggles. We'll spend most of the time in glacier glasses this trip. Again, 21 days, 22 days, maybe 15 days, but like planning on the conservative side, we're out there for about 3 weeks. Really worth having a backup pair of glacier glasses, so that if they get smashed, they get broken, they get lost in the tent, the screw falls out of the arm, whatever it is, this is a critical piece of gear up there. So good to have 2 pairs there. And then goggles are for weather. We don't spend a lot of time in goggles, but we need them as backup for poor weather if we get caught in the stormy session, which often is like we're goggling up in camp to dig out tents if we end up in the snow cycle. So A good biking sunglass that works wrap around your face. I'm just going to catch this one as it shows up. So yes, to an extent. I mean, I think you just want to make sure they are dark enough that you're not squinting, that they're decreasing the visible light enough that it's comfortable for your eyes. All sunglasses remove 100% of the UV, so that side of things, they're gonna work. Personally, and this isn't an endorsement, it's just what I have experience with. Like, I absolutely have done my last trip, I think I was in a pair of Oakley Sutros, which is exactly what you are describing. So yeah, they work so long as the lenses are dark enough to be on snow all day, and your eyes and kind of the headache side of things stay comfortable. Then a good pair of biking glasses would work. And a way to go, I typically climb in a set like that with really good, wraparound and protection. And then the pair that's in my pack that's a backup is probably a pair of Glacier glasses. So I have the option, but then I just get to choose the pair I like the most. Flipping back to goggles, often we're wearing them in camp, digging out. It's a foul weather thing. Light colored lenses are the best. So a lot of these have interchangeable lenses. Bring the light colored lenses for the low light because we're wearing them in storm. And they don't have to be super fancy. The goal is just to seal out wind, snow, and the rest of it. Glove layers, run a 4-glove system. The ones that I think are most important to focus on really are at the upper end. So that heavyweight glove and the expedition mitt. Again, sorry, searching for examples. This is my expedition mitt. So I just bring a true down puffy mitt. Try and be as warm as possible. I don't think in 15 trips that I've ever actually put those on. But again, going back to the piece of, there is, in my mind, no rational reason to walk away from this trip with frostbite. That is always my insurance policy. So I don't skimp on that side of things. I haven't put them on ever or very rarely. And yet I always bring them. They're always there with me on summit day. It's not something that I would ever consider leaving behind. And then from there down, that heavyweight glove, that's a Black Diamond guide glove, but that's a double glove. So there's the internal pile liner and then the bigger outer glove, pretty big and bulky, but warm. And that is pretty much my always summit day glove, starting across the Autobahn, is that with hand warmers in it. That's really the primary place for that. So it's summit day. And then certainly down lower is backup, right? On a cold day or on the fixed lines or something, I'm struggling to keep my hands warm, I'm moving into that glove. I spend most of the trip then in the midweight gloves. I find that's the glove I am shoveling camp in, that I'm probably wearing most often from 11 up. And then I do the lightweight gloves, both for moving around down low on the glacier. So for the approach up towards 11, I'm in a totally uninsulated leather glove that's both sun protection for my hands and then abrasion protection if we had to self-arrest, abrasion protection from all of the things we're carrying and pulling with sleds and the rest of it. I do think, some folks will bring the really light sun gloves. And to me, that's maybe a fifth option that's so small, like you can afford that comfort luxury and that keeps the sun off your hands. But the leather glove up there is ideal because it is a long trip, and between shoveling, snowshoes, there's so many just sharp things around. It tends to beat up fleece gloves and light liner gloves and things like that, and you put holes in them pretty quickly. So leather definitely holds up the best and would be the ideal in my mind. In that midweight glove zone, that's one where it's both the BD patrol glove like that's shown, something you'd go alpine skiing in the winter in the Rockies. It could be a pair of like full leather Kinkos or work gloves or anything like that. And that's another one where I will often, especially because we find ourselves shoveling a lot, have two, so that excuse me, so that I've got, if one gets damp from a camp building session, I have another dry one to put on because I do spend so much time in those. Yeah, a lobster mitt would be sorry, answering another question here. Are mittens okay for the heavyweight or do we need gloves? That's a great question. And I think I'm going to touch on both of the questions that are here in one. I think you do want to have, you want this setup the way it's shown, you want the heavyweight glove. And primarily because Summit Day, we do go across the Autobahn, is about somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours of unbroken climbing. It's a steeper side hill with no real good places to stop. And because of that too, we have running protection the entire way across. I think the last time I counted, it's like between 38 and 40 pickets usually that we have to clip running belays through as we cross that section. And the dexterity that comes with the glove really facilitates that. Mittens can be really tough. I think, I don't know if it was University of Fairbanks or Anchorage or one of the med schools, somebody up there did do a study on frostbite and found that mittens on the Summit Day period up there, especially up high, mittens seems to correlate quite highly with incidents of frostbite, but not because your hands are getting cold in mittens, but because you end up taking the mitten off all the time to try to accomplish any tasks. So it's important to have for that. I need to get my hands warm now and I need to keep them warm. And it's something that I go to as a safety backup rather than something I want to rely on, because I do find we are trying to do so much with our hands. Mittens can really hinder that. The lobster mitt, I think, is a nice hybrid where perhaps that would be the right answer. You still have the like a trigger finger that you can use to work some carabiner gates and things like that. So if you practice with it and you're comfortable with it, that could be great. And should the mitten fit over top of the heavy gloves? No, each of these is independent. So that's a really great question. I try not to have any systems where one of the gloves relies on another for that incident. If you lose one, if one's wet, something else, then the whole system, especially kind of at the liner layer level, the whole system falls apart. So, sorry, as I talk. The mittens stand alone. The heavyweight gloves stand alone. The midweight gloves stand alone, and the lightweight gloves stand alone. If you want to have a liner, additionally, that you can have on your hand and tuck into one of those, that can be a good option for things like mittens. Once we're past the Autobahn, the rest of Summit Day is relatively non-technical until the Summit Ridge. So if we come off the Autobahn and it's like, hey, my fingers are a little chilly, that's a great time to throw mittens on, and just a really lightweight liner. And then the mittens is a good way to be able to take the mitten off, but then not freeze your hands. So we may wear mittens for that period, and that could be a good way to handle that. And just to kind of see the whole setting, it's, I'm going to be wearing my heavyweight gloves. I have hand warmers in them across the Autobahn. It is this place where it's difficult to pull over and stop and take a break. And we'll coach everybody quite heavily and extensively before we launch for Summit Day, the night before the rest. But one of the ways I handle that, again, because I really don't want to freeze my hands, I think should be the takeaway from all of this, is I'm climbing in those heavyweight gloves with hand warmers, and my mittens are tucked into usually the sleeves of my parka as I climb, so that if I really start to have a hand get cold, I can pull that glove off, put a mitten on, tuck it back in, and in a pretty quick 30 seconds, make a switch and maintain warmth in that hand. So that piece is probably one of the ones I harp on the most. It's a key piece of what we're doing, is trying to help give people strategies for coming out of that safely. And we will put a lot of effort and mental capacity into that side of things and coaching that. Leaving the clothing area, some of the other pieces, 85 plus liter backpack This one is a personal one. I think backpack fit is the most important thing. So you need to find a backpack that fits well and sits well on your body with weight in it. So that means trying on some under ideal circumstances, and finding the ones that do seem to do best for you. Some folks will do well with a minimal backpack like the one shown, smaller profile hip belt. The rest of it actually helps to carry the weight better and make it more comfortable for some folks. And for some folks that would tear them up and they need, a larger, kind of more bulkier suspension, bigger, beefier hip belt, that's going to carry better for them. It really is. I find that to just be a personal piece, of what fits right. 85 liters is probably the minimum. You certainly can do it that way. And folks, often will bring a 105 liter, 100 plus liter pack. And the difference I find there, if you're trying to make that call with an 85 liter pack, it's doable. You put more time, and mental energy into packing. Like to do it with an 85 liter pack, you have to pack your pack really well, and be using every inch of space and figuring out how to cram each of those pieces in there. A 105 liter pack gives you a little bit more flexibility or room to fudge it. There will probably be a bit of leftover space, so you don't have to be quite as diligent with your packing job each day in camp. So yeah, there's, I think you can either go as light as possible and try to keep things small in the 85 zone, knowing you're gonna expend some energy to do it. And 105, you carry a touch more, you have a bit more space, but I think it also just makes the job easier. So either one is fine. The sled duffel, you'll notice there, all of a sudden we're showing the most basic duffel out there. I think they sell it at Walmart. So the goal of the sled duffel is to get the most capacity. It's going to fit in a sled that's probably 4 feet long. And you're trying to, cover as much of that sled area as you can and have everything in it ride as low as possible. So this is one of those times, the classic North Face base camp duffel, great duffels, but they tend to be a little bit shorter and sit a little taller. And that in the sled, fully weighted and everything, can have more of a tendency to then have the sled want to roll on any of the side hills we move across. It can be really infuriating, especially on the way down. So long, low, and then trying to have it just be able to put everything possible into it. So we will be, the whole team has to help move all the group gear up and down the mountain. That includes a gallon of white gas. It can include stove parts, a pot. The goal is to get all of those things in the duffel so that they're contained, because that will have the sled ride as smoothly as possible and really keep you moving worry-free. As soon as we start trying to strap things on the outside, the duffel, and they're kind of loose in the sled but bungeed to something, that's when the sled rolls and things become a bit of a mess, and it really is pretty frustrating for all involved. Snowshoes, they're a reality of the trip. I don't think some people love snowshoeing recreationally. I don't think anybody loves snowshoeing as part of a Denali trip. Doesn't need to be fancy. So the MSR ones shown have, a bit of a suspended fabric piece as far as the platform you're on. There's also the MSR Ascent, I think, that it's really just a flat plastic plate with a binding on it. So either of those options works well. Some of those have like extensions for the tail so that for extra flotation. Typically what we're moving through, I don't find it worth it to bring those. So just bring the snowshoe itself. You definitely want to have the riser bars, the heel risers on there. So make sure that whatever snowshoes you're coming with have heel risers. As we leave, primarily it's the base of Ski Hill to move up towards 11,000. Most of that is terrain where the heel risers end up really saving your calves and creating efficiency. In addition, trekking poles. And for this one, in most of the climbs, Rainier and elsewhere, I'm a real proponent of one pole often, and I'll move through most of that terrain with just one pole. You want to come to Alaska with two, because for that initial approach on the lower Kahiltna, 2 poles as you're towing the sled moving up the glacier is really helpful. And then typically somewhere at 11 or 14, I'll leave 1 pole cached in camp and just start climbing with a pole and an ice axe. Lots of options through here in terms of what you need to do through camp, but and for food. The idea being so a few thoughts here. Bowls, make sure they're big enough. We're going to be making typically some larger 1-pot meals, and you want to be able to get like a pretty good serving on the first round rather than having to come back 2, 3, 4 times. And there's probably going to be seconds for everybody, and we're typically trying to convince people to finish food versus the pot being drained. But with that, there's a lot of options. There's some of the silicone kind of flat folding bowls. That's great. I've always really loved these origami bowls because they just take 0 space. But there's also big Lexan mugs and things like that, and those I find to just create a lot of dead space in the pack when you have to carry them. Tend not to be as friendly for moving with, so it's always a consideration. You definitely want a spoon or a spork. Not only do you want one, you definitely want 2, because you'll either break one or it'll be lost in your pack or lost in the tent come mealtime. So have backups with that. And then water, it's same as anywhere. 2 to 3 liters is going to be enough for pretty much everybody, because we're carrying water to move between camps. So we're just carrying water to be out moving, and then we're going to be melting and boiling as fast as we can to get people full water bottles again. So 2 is what I've always done. I think that's a good goal. Water is heavy. You can do Nalgene's for sure, most common. Big one here is wide mouth bottles, whatever they are. The narrow mouth bottles, we're just melting snow in a pot and then trying to fill bottles with a measuring cup. And that the small mouth ones become really tricky. Similarly, do us a favor and leave the rubber sippy insert at home, because those make it really difficult to fill as well. But with that, you can do the 2-liter Nalgene, the 2 single-liter Nalgenes. I frequently combine the last 3 pieces a little bit, and I'll bring a 1.5-liter bottle with the neoprene cover, and then I bring a 0.5-liter hydro flask, so insulated stainless one that both doubles. It can be a water bottle, and some days there's just water in there. It's also my coffee mug in camp, and then I can also put hot water in there on summit day to have a hot drink over the course of summit day. So I have 2-liter capacity overall, but it's a singular 1.5-liter bottle and then a 0.5-liter insulated hydro flask. For Denali, these pieces are pretty standard. When you come towards Rainier, it's nothing much different. So the ice axe, pretty standard mountaineering ice axe. We will often spend time climbing with both an ice axe in hand and a trekking pole. Some of the terrain we move through, like the fixed lines, are steeper. So I do think erring on the side of a shorter ice axe for the technical terrain and the fact that we often move with a pole is warranted up here for sure. And then you're going to want 12-point steel mountaineering crampons, either full auto, so you can have just the wire bail in the front and the lever on the back. If all of the boots will support that. And then certainly this sort of semi-auto is a nice way to go too. The semi-auto is probably a bit more friendly with overboots on. The full auto is certainly really nice with your triple boots, where you're not going to have to deal with overboots, and just a bit faster and a bit more secure that way. But any of those options work. The biggest thing with these is to double check before you come the length of the center bar. So if your boot as is tends to get towards the end of the usable length of that center bar, I would say that adding a overboot typically means having to go, one more hole on a black diamond crampon, or an in-between hole or maybe one hole on a Petzl. And so if you're towards the end, then you may lose. You don't want to be on the last hole of the center bar. So make sure you double check that before you come and get long center bars if you need. Strap-ons are definitely okay. 12 is better. We spend more time in steep terrain on steep snow, and on for like some pretty icy stuff, especially on the fixed lines. The fixed lines can be quite blue. So the 12 points will give you better purchase there. And then like the one thing is just like nobody should show up with aluminum crampons. They just don't hold in the ice, and they're not going to hold up to the demands of this expedition. But a full strap-on 12-point would be totally okay. Climbing harnesses, again, like this is one where there's some room. You can show up with a bulkier one. I think the ideal is a lightweight alpine harness that you can put on while you're standing up, that you don't have to step into, but that you can do the waist belt through the belay loop and put on just kind of in situ. That helps a lot with, you can pull your puffy pants part way down and get your harness on and pull them back up while you're in camp. Just makes life a little bit easier. Really, and there aren't very many left anymore, but you want to have a belay loop on there, like a true belay loop. The triple action carabiner is going to be what you clip in with to the rope. And then the rest of this is largely for rigging your ascender system. So 2 locking carabiners and some non-locking carabiners is both for your ascender, helps set up sleds for the sled pull, and then gear to have on you in the event of a crevasse rescue scenario. And then the ascender. There are a few mountains that really require true fixed line travel. Denali's one of them. We're going to climb fixed lines from about 15.2, about 1,000 feet above 14 camp, to the crest of the West Buttress Ridge at 16.2. The fixed line there is primarily an efficiency tool. So it's one where it's there so that we can move through that terrain pretty fluidly, and we don't need to pitch it out. We don't need to protect it the way we would if the fixed lines weren't there. It also becomes a point where with the ascender, we can move the ascender up, and it gives us something to balance against a little bit to be able to do most of the work on our feet. So we're not using the ascender to jug up a fixed rope and pull in upper body. It's really just a piece to balance against and then do all of the work with your legs still. The fixed lines change every year a little bit. The alignment, they actually stay up there all year. And then as the season gets rolling, successive teams and the rangers get up there and start to unbury them and kind of hammer them out of the ice, and we'll see what shape they're in, and then sections either get replaced or they get freed. So the alignment can vary, but typically we spend some time with the ascender with the rope, the fixed rope on our left side, and we often step across it part way up and end up with the fixed rope on our right side. And so the handedness of ascenders really doesn't matter. You are going to spend time with the ascender in your right hand, and you're going to spend time with it in your left hand. You can operate a right-handed ascender with the trigger finger of your left hand still really effectively, and vice versa. So don't put too much, you don't need too much brain damage in terms of trying to track down, oh, I'm right-handed, I need a right-handed ascender, or vice versa. The fixed lines are on the left, I need a left. Get the ascender you can get, and we'll be able to work with it. You'll be able to work with it. And then a few other components in here. You've got several double-length slings. One of those we'll use that to create our kind of ascender setup. We can also use them as the sled pull, as a trace around our pack, and they'll get used potentially in the event of a crevasse rescue or something like that. Single-length slings are coming along, similar handful of different uses. Also a ditch loop on your pack, so something to be able to get out of your pack if you were the one to go into the crevasse. The accessory cord that's on there, a lot of that is just to be able to either use that to lash the duffel to the sled, gets used in the tents to create some hanging and drying space, is really the primary pieces. And to have the, the 7 mil is then you have an option for a cordelette if need be. You don't, everything that's shown here, you don't necessarily need all of it. Like the bungee cords piece, some people really prefer to have bungee cords to secure sleds to duffels. I find it to not necessarily be as secure, but it's easier to get into your duffel while we're on the trail. So there's some trade-offs there. I tend to just use a cordelette and lash my duffel into my sled that way. But bungee cords are an option too. So you can really choose one or the other, figure out what your system's going to be. And then micro tractions and tib locks. Again, that's a Crevasse Rescue piece that's nice to have. It makes that system more efficient, but by no means mandatory. And honestly, up here, 6 or 7 mils, either is fine for the cord side of things. They would hold what we need. 7 mil for anchors is really what we look at in these sort of settings. But 6 in an alpine setting is okay. If you're buying new cord, just err on the side of 7. If you already have 6, use that. I think that's the choice there, to try to prevent having to just go out and get brand new stuff and too much of it. Give me one. There we go. Everyone give me 1 second. My apologies for the late show. Avalanche beacon, got to have it. We're wearing that anytime we're moving around. Much of the lower Kit Hilton is pretty flat, but there are big slopes. We're generally pretty clear of it, but we are moving through avalanche terrain, so we're wearing an avalanche transceiver whenever we're out of camp and moving. Bring it, that one, the trip's long enough, you probably aren't going to go through a set of batteries, but have an extra set. That's just good practice. Kind of fired off on this at the very beginning, but we have the big trauma kit. So your first aid kit, your personal first aid kit should be really small. You're going to want some stuff to deal with blisters, kind of your favorite for dealing with blisters for your feet. So that may be like things I go to are some little second skin patches or the blister pads. And then KT tape makes like blister tape. Or full KT tape is also really nice for just wrapping more of a heel. So those are good options. Leuco tape people really like. Duct tape certainly fine and time tested. All of those options are on the table, right? So bring your kind of preference for dealing with blisters. I would have, a few Band-Aids. I think one of the biggest things we deal with are just some like nicks from hitting things on hands or just cracked skin from being up there in the cold and dry. So a little bit of Band-Aid, little bit of, the moisturizer can actually be nice up there for the hands, things like that. But it should really be super minimal. Some Advil or Tylenol, whatnot. And then any medications you take that you need. But that side will be really minimal. The additional piece that we have going to altitude, we do require that every climber comes with Diamox, dexamethasone, and nifedipine that's prescribed to them. And those are medications that, Diamox we'll talk about with each climber. That's one where I think there is there's a choice to be made for each individual climber, and we can provide some guidance on dosing and the rest, and maybe things we've seen work well. But some folks will, some folks are going to feel a lot more comfortable using Diamox up high. Great. Some folks aren't going to use it and just carry it for just in case. Also great. Any of those things are fine. With this one, a lot of doctors don't necessarily understand what their the prescribing guidelines for using it at altitude, because it also has other uses, I think, in the blood pressure realm. So it often gets over prescribed in terms of dosage. You want to have 125s. So it comes in 125s and 250s commonly, and the 250s are too much for us to be taking for our purposes. 125s give us the benefit of it at altitude and really do the most to limit the side effects. And then dexamethasone and nifedipine, we're carrying for emergency situations. Those are used for pulmonary edema and cerebral edema. So those are things where we're going to tell climbers, hey, nobody's touching these. You're going to carry them, but don't touch them. The reason we need everybody to bring them is just because they are prescription medications. So if someone needs them, it is legally far more clear if people are taking their own prescription medications than something else provided by an outside entity. So everybody's carrying that stuff. Again, something we're going to really make sure we're not using. The other small items for around camp, I think I touched on, moisturizer, lip balm with sunscreen in it, with SPF. By all means, without SPF in it, then it sort of feels like you're just putting, like tanning oil on your lips and really exacerbating things. So sun protection for your lips, toothbrush, toothpaste, and a small travel size type thing. Pee bottles are they just make life so much better to not have to crawl out of the tent when it is super cold in the middle of the night, and kit back up to try to go pee and go back. This just kind of saves your sleep and saves your night. Toilet paper, I think 2 rolls is more than you need, but 1 roll typically isn't enough. So you typically bring 2 rolls and you'll come back with most of the second. But better safe than sorry there. Wet wipes, nice for a little bit of a wet wipe bath, freshen up the face, get some sunscreen off, that kind of stuff. And then hand sanitizer, like bring a couple of bottles so that you can have one in a pocket and one in the lid of your pack, and that they are around. I think the biggest thing one of my biggest focuses, it's tiny and small and makes sense, and it's probably where we are most call it at risk in terms of success or failure for an entire expedition, is just cleanliness and being able to stay healthy. If dirty hands get into the kitchen and then that can really knock a whole team out pretty quickly. So we're really diligent. Hand sanitizer, brings several of those. Sunscreen, insect repellent, that's on there primarily actually for Talkeetna. So Talkeetna can have mosquitoes, especially midsummer. There are no bugs once we're on the glacier. So that stuff stays in town, but it can be nice. I mean, you joke about Alaskan mosquitoes being the size of birds, but it's not far off. Earplugs are helpful. Sleeping mask, especially because it never gets truly dark. Sleeping mask can be a game changer, or just a buff over your eyes. Hand warmers, even if you go, oh man, I never really use these, bring probably I would probably come on with 3 to 4 pair. I always crack a pair on summit day, no matter how tough I think I am. And I always crack a second pair as a backup. And I just go out of the gates with 1 pair in my gloves and 1 pair tucked into my mitts, ready to go if I were to drop one, or if they start to die or it's not enough. And then I've got 2 pair for backup for around the mountain or something like that, or for the way down if I really needed them. And then, and some folks will come on with a pair of hand warmers for most of the days of the trip. If your hands get cold and you struggle to keep them warm, that is a totally reasonable way to go too. So that's a bit of a personal choice you can make. The eyeglasses, contact lenses, somebody had asked earlier, I think, do contact lenses work up there? And the answer is yes. And they take some more diligence, right? If those things get left out in the tent, then the saline in the container will freeze. And suddenly it's hard. You're trying to thaw them back out before you can put them on, type scenario. I personally don't wear contacts, so I'm not an expert in them, but I've guided around plenty of guides who do and watched it enough. So just being really diligent with having clean hands before you go to put lenses in is critical. And then for most of those folks, like the lenses in the lens case just live in a chest pocket on a lower layer pretty much throughout the expedition. So you're sleeping with them there. You just always know they're there and warm. If you're using contacts, then it's always going to be just good practice to have the backup of a true set of eyeglasses in case you lose them, you freeze them, some piece of that system isn't working. So 5 to 6 large garbage bags. The primary reason they're on the list, go to the last question I think I'm seeing here about stuff sacks for caches. So you can use garbage bags for caches. I really like stuff sacks instead. I think it's just cleaner. We are trying to shovel the cache back out when we unbury it, and a single shovel strike tends to tear open a trash bag potentially, and then that one's done. So it's just more trash on the mountain that we're trying to carry back off. Stuff sacks work really nicely that way. So some big, like almost like the pack liner size sil nylon sacks, a 40, 50, even 60-liter stuff sack is great for being able to do your personal cache in that. Because a lot of times you're going to cache half or 2/3 of your food, plus maybe some pairs of socks, plus over boots, plus maybe your helmet. The caches can be quite large down low. Pocket knife, just good practice. Watch, good practice. You don't have to have an altimeter watching the rest of it. I think it is helpful to be able to see some time, and I think these days everybody loves to be able to track the climbs and the data and the rest of it. So I think that we've seen to be pretty ubiquitous at this point. And then the inReach, the satellite communicator. I think we're the biggest place I see that, like the question around that right now, is a lot of the phones do have some satellite capability, right? The new iPhone can send a satellite text, and it is slow and it chews through battery, and it typically means you trying to orient the thing. It's a bit cumbersome. The inReach is still a better solution for having reliable communication at this point. Wouldn't be surprised if we're saying something different about that in a few years. But the inReach is a great way to be able to stay in touch with folks at home, whatever it may be, and by no means required. If you're coming up here and you're happy to unplug and psyched to unplug and for kind of the quietness of it and to have a bit of a break from that side of things, totally okay. But I think we have seen with how small they are, and how relatively easy they are to use and connect to and the rest, that we're seeing most folks bring one. And then these pieces all, a journal. I think really what we're looking at is how you set up your camp time and what you're going to need to be able to stay mentally present or sane in camp through some rest days, through some weather days. So for me, that is a Kindle, like the really basic Kindle Paperwhite that you can load so many books on. And that piece is a primary piece of entertainment for me, as well as, it's like download a few movies or TV shows or whatever to your phone to have those pieces to relieve some boredom, either on a rest day or there is the potential to have an extended weather stay at one of these camps, certainly at 14, where you may be waiting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days to get the weather window to go for the summit. And those can be pretty critical for kind of maintaining some sanity through that period. Highly recommend then at that point also like sharing it around or sort of co-oping it. So, we watch tent mates end up, watching, kind of pooling all their movies and watching movies together, and that side of things to just try to stay entertained. Power banks, I think we're all coming with some version of electronics. I think it can be easy to make that just become really big and a lot of weight. So trying to be reasonable about how much power you really need. You need a couple of phone charges at most probably. And then we're going to be bringing, you're going to have a solar panel to be able to recharge it. And there's plenty of sun in Alaska. So, a reasonably sized power bank for every climber. And then as we get towards the trip date, who your teammates are. We start to meet on that 30-day out Zoom. That's a great time to start to collaborate between. We don't necessarily need 9 solar panels to come up for 9 climbers. I think that's overall added group weight. So you can start to workshop with some people how you might share that amongst tents or tent groups or something like that. So that typically a solar panel per tent then allows everybody to rotate batteries across it. And that works out well for folks. I think for many, their phone is their camera. If something like the GoPro shown, for sure. If you want to take the photography up a little bit, if that's a passion, by all means, bring a camera along. Again, I would keep it small, and recognize, like, especially with GoPros, it's just like they do chew through a lot of batteries. So it's being kind of coming in with a plan for how you're going to use that and deploy that, and recognizing that in a lot of the terrain, we need to stay focused on climbing, and photography is going to be kind of a distant fourth, fifth, sixth priority down the line in terms of what the team needs to accomplish. Okay, we got through it. See Christian popping back in.
I'm back.
I'm sure there are some.
Pete. That was a heck of a lot of information. Sweet. So yeah, we are going to go through questions now. We kind of handled a decent amount during the slides, but Pete, I think I'll just go through the questions and put them up on the screen, and then you can go through and answer. We'll kind of just go through in the order they were asked. So we don't have to switch back to the slides or anything, but yeah, go for it.
Cool. Any opinion on Mammut's 6,000 meter boots? Yeah, I think it's a fine option. Like, really similar to the Phantom 6,000s or the G2s. If that fits your foot well, I think that's a great option. And over boots, like with a 6,000 meter boot, you're going to want to bring over boots for sure. But I don't have a strong opinion there. Are triples going to be warmer overall? Yes. They're warmer, and so I think there is kind of a sense of, potentially down low, your feet may be pretty warm on that first day or two on the lower Kahiltma. I think pretty quickly that goes away to where they're quite comfortable from 11 up or ski hill up, depending on conditions. But they are warmer. I think the trade-off piece, I've never actually gone and weighed what the combination of like a double boot plus an overboot is versus a triple. I find the triples to be probably just the most foolproof on summit day. If you're gonna get a boot for Denali, great. The triple is less versatile if you're looking at a boot that can also cross across to some other objectives, right? A double boot's totally plays well on Rainier, plays well on Aconcagua, goes a lot of places. The triple boot is certainly overkill on Rainier and not as durable in that type of environment, walking on the rock that we do. So it really depends on what your priorities are there. But I think either of those is a good option in the end.
I think there's also a price and availability factor there too. Yeah. I know La Sportiva stopped making one or two of their triple boot styles, and Scarpa's the new Thermic 8000. I don't think there's an option without a built-in heater, right? And that makes it pretty expensive too. So cost is definitely a factor as well.
Yeah. My favorite soft shell pant. So I am actually not great at remembering the names of things. So I think Christian is actually probably well placed on this one for the Black Diamond option, which a lot of us are wearing. I also have a Nerona Lofoten pant that I've climbed in quite a bit. So it's a ski touring pant that I think it probably is a little bit baggier. It accommodates a ski boot because it's a ski touring pant, but then I find that the pocket options and the venting options and the weight of it is overall right for me climbing up in Alaska. So that's one I've used a lot. Christian, Black Diamond is
the like Black Diamond Alpine pant is
perfect.
The one that guides tend to like. They make an Alpine and an Alpine Light pant, but the Alpine Light we wouldn't recommend for Denali. But there's a lot of good options out there. Outdoor Research, their Cirque 3 pant is great. Patagonia makes some good ones. They're all fairly similar in kind of that mid-weight soft shell pant range.
Yeah.
That one, the transcript we will definitely do our best to provide afterwards. Still learning this software, so not exactly sure how that's going to work, but I will get it out to the best of my ability.
And we are going to post this via YouTube, I believe, right, Christian? So at least the whole video and these answers will be available. If you go with triple boots, you do not need over boots. Great question. Simple.
Nice.
Oh man, the Caldera. Was that the big puffy from Bite?
Yeah.
Again, names catch me out. That would be okay. Yeah, that's one we were using up there quite a bit, and that would be fine. And again, taking into account everything else we're going to wear with it.
Cool. Bowl brands.
Bowl brand. The origami one, which I think is Fossils, if I'm correct.
Think so. Yeah.
Is the one I personally use, and I like quite a bit, and it's been through a bunch of trips at this point and held up throughout. So that's the one I like. There's certainly, like, Sea to Summit has a collapsible silicone one that we see come up a ton. What else? Yeah, those are probably the ones.
Cool.
Leash and tether. So you don't need, we will throw leashes on ice axes, but just for a really brief period, primarily for the fixed lines. And the reason we're using a leash and the concern there is the consequences of dropping it and it hitting somebody else. So for most of the rest of the climb, we aren't going to have a leash on the ice axe, and that helps to just be more adaptable with it, or even stow it away if we want to. And so because of that, I don't bring a dedicated leash. I'm using one of the double length slings for that. I can girth hitch the double length sling through the head of the ice axe and then girth hitch that to my belay loop.
Great.
It depends. We will go under capacity by 1 for the tents up to 14, and then at 17 we'll go to capacity. So we're bringing up a mixture of 3 and 4 person Mountain Hardware Trango tents. And so we'll go out with a mixture of 3 people in a 4-man tent and 2 people in a 3-person tent. And then by 17, we're going to be 3 in a 3 and 4 in a 4. Ooh, I think like 7.5 is that Goal Zero panel that's shown, 7.5 watt, I think. And that's sufficient up there, especially for just, trying to keep phones charged and small things like GoPros. My battery bank, I think, is like 100 milliamps. It gets about 2 full iPhone charges out of it. So it's about the size of an iPhone.
Cool. I can take this one, which Pete, you can feel free to hop into as well. But with renting versus owning, it's kind of a question of what you already have and what you plan on continuing to do in the mountains. A lot of this stuff is pretty expensive, and we do offer most of it for rent with Whitaker Mountaineering. If you think you're going to use it on other summits, definitely consider buying it. If you think that Denali might be kind of the culmination of your climbing career, renting might be a better option. But it's really just the kind of thing where, put 2 carts together and see what the difference is in price and what that feels like to you. But Pete, do you have anything else to add there?
No, I think that makes total sense. I think for the pieces that I focus on most are typically pack and boots, because those are the places where fit is most important. So if there's something you're going to end up purchasing, that tends to be where I put the focus in order to get the fit side right. But yeah.
Cool. Popular question.
My favorite. It's a tricky one, and I think the baseline answer isn't totally no, but essentially, especially with trips going out this year, snowshoeing is the default, and all the trips are going to have folks on snowshoes, and it is really difficult to, especially on the descent. It's primarily difficult on the descent to be a skier tied to snowshoers, especially in the middle of a rope. So I think if you're on a trip this year and you're thinking about it, it's going to be a personal conversation between you and myself and probably the lead guide of the trip, to see if that it all makes sense. And to be totally clear, often at least pieces of the guide team do go in on skis. And that's not because it's necessarily easier. I think actually it's harder on the way out. It's just a kind of unbroken power wedge. But the skis do provide some piece for guides who are the first ones walking across the crevasse, of a little added security that way, to be able to suss some things out. And then if we do have to get somebody out to the airstrip for whatever reason, or help someone leave the trip early, then skis can facilitate that happening a little bit faster, so that the guide team can return to the trip and keep things moving a little bit more efficiently. So our guides are on skis at times, but I think for most, snowshoes are going to be right. And I think looking to the future, and this is one of the pieces I am excited about, I think we will be looking at running some effectively like a ski approach trip, where we can put together a team of folks to do the approach on skis and then climb from 11 or 14. Look for that in the future. Aluminum, not for this one. You're going to want a true steel mountaineering crampon. So 12-point mountaineering crampon. Yes, I forgot. I even thought about it early today. I was like, oh, the one piece what do we not need for sure up here? We do not need a headlamp. You can leave that one behind. Probably the only trip we do that on.
And that's just because it's sunny all the time, right? Sun doesn't fully
light all the time. You can see.
Yep. All right.
Is securing crampons to boots with overboots difficult? No. It typically is pretty smooth. It often just requires like a small adjustment of the crampon, which guides will help with, and which we'll do, as we get to the point of needing to use overboots.
Cool.
Mess tent. We are using a Hilleberg Chiron 4 Fly with no body in it. So it's big, just a big hoop tent, tunnel tent. That's super. We've gone to that because they are quite durable in the wind, especially up there. So makes a really nice, pretty weatherproof shelter for cooking. And then we can dig that down to create standing space and sitting space for a pretty comfortable kitchen area. Packs and sleds typically. So it varies over the course of a expedition. Really, the heaviest we'll ever be is right as we leave base camp on the way out to start. And that's really the one where we're carrying everything all at once. So it's split between the pack and the sled. And those ones probably sit in the, between pack and sled, you're dealing with 100 to 120 pounds, call it. And you can probably get somewhere in the realm of 65 into a pack, and then the rest is going to a sled. So that initial day is pretty heavy, but quite flat. And then from there, we start the process of carrying cache. So we're really moving half our weight at any given point. So things get lighter. And then on the way out, things get heavy again, just for, as we're moving down, we are moving down in a full push, but we're not having to bring out as much, but we are carrying out our waste and our trash and things that we cached at camp. So we start to just kind of add weight as we hit each camp and pick up caches. So yeah, it's there. I think, to juxtapose that, the move to 17 is probably, those packs are somewhere in the 50-pound range. And the funny one is the carry to 17. When we cache at 17, it's really minimal. It's 1 to 2 days of freeze-dried food, and a day of lightweight snack food like your goos and your gummies. And that cache day, you're usually carrying 20 pounds. It's quite light, and it's really a good chance to see the fixed lines before we do it for real.
Cool.
I've been pretty lucky. I haven't, but it's certainly a good idea to have a spare, definitely a hip belt buckle, right? That's a critical one. So yeah, I have been lucky on that front, and We can always figure out things with zip ties and duct tape and baling wire, but having a spare belt buckle for your pack is a great way to go.
For this, for this one, yeah. So this, we will get to this in a different webinar. We're going to do another one probably at the beginning of the year, sometime in January, talking about training and fitness for Denali. So Matt, we will get to that question, just not today.
And the reason we're punting is because it's not a simple answer. There's a lot that goes into that. Which is why we're going to do a whole webinar. And yes, we're carrying it all off. We are going to carry the waste off.
That goes along with another question from Connor. What's the wag bag situation like?
Oh, wag bags. So Denali is unique. The park has its own system up there. We're using Clean Mountain cans, referred to as CMCs. So it's a green, I think it's like a 2.5 gallon green roto-molded bucket with a screw-on lid. And then that gets like a compostable bag liner inside of it. And so trips do handle these a little bit differently. It's a bit of a guide piece and left up to the guides and the team to work out. Some trips will have, each person have their own individual can that they sort of move with and track through the trip. Others will do more of a community can that then that way we can, once it's full, we cache it at a camp and then pick it up on the way out. But we are carrying out all of our waste. That was a piece with the park probably 8 years ago that we started doing because it was a desire of the park and more environmentally friendly that way. Any of our, we're peeing in the snow. So the pee stays, but the human waste is coming off.
Cool.
Black Diamond Sabertooth Pros. Yeah. I did a bunch of climbs with the Sabertooth. That's a great crampon for this. Yeah. The other one that can be really nice is they have the little Snaggletooth. I forget the name of that, but the BD Snaggletooth crampon is another great one for this where we are spending. Yeah. Oh, that one is the Snaggletooth? Great. Perfect. We will, if you're climbing with us, we'll be getting any sort of dietary information very early on in the registration process, and then absolutely we're accommodating for those things. So we do our very best. Most things we've done trips where we can accommodate for someone who's vegan, vegetarian, has kosher. We can handle most of that. I can't think of one we haven't been able to, but that becomes a conversation early on in the registration process.
Awesome. Well, that's all the questions. Last thing before you guys get out of here, we promised you a little extra discount for showing up. So there's this link that should show up. If you're an RMI client, you automatically get 10% off everything at Whitaker Mountaineering for life. But right now, since you came to the webinar, you get 15% off everything in the Denali collection. So if you hit that button, it should take you to that collection. And if you use the code Alaska Webinar at checkout, you'll get an extra 15% off everything. And that'll go out in the post email too. And Chris, sorry, no summit suit on Denali, right, Pete? Just
no,
that, but,
I think that's a joke the way I see it written, but yeah, no summit suit needed.
Well, thank you guys so much. This has been awesome. It's super cool to start doing webinars again. And we'll send out the email with the recording and everything. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, appreciate everybody. Thanks, Christian.
Thanks, Pete. Have a good night, everyone.